Before the pistachio became an American crop, it was already an old traveler. Its story began across the dry lands of Western and Central Asia, where a tree learned to endure heat, winter cold, and uncertainty. People carried it through Persia toward the Mediterranean. Empires changed, the tree remained. That history matters, because a pistachio orchard is never built for the impatient. The tree asks for years before it gives much back. It rewards attention, timing, and faith that has to survive more than one season. Long before America grew pistachios at scale, generations of growers elsewhere had learned that lesson. For centuries, pistachios moved between cultures. A familiar food in the Middle East, a prized ingredient around the Mediterranean, and eventually a small luxury farther north. By the late 19th century, imports found an eager American audience, especially in immigrant communities carrying old tastes into a new country. But enjoying a pistachio and building an industry are different things. Imports could fill a shop. They could not answer the harder question: could this ancient tree become a dependable American crop? That would take favorable land, public research, and people willing to wait years for a tree to reveal whether a decision was right. In 1929, United States plant explorer William Whitehouse traveled through Persia collecting pistachio seed. He returned with roughly 20 pounds. Those seeds were planted and observed at the Federal Plant Introduction Station in Chico, California. From that collection, one selection stood apart. It came from seed lot PI 86372. Researchers selected it in 1936, named it Kingman, and released it for trial in 1957. Pause on those dates. Collection, selection, release. Nearly 3 decades separated the journey from the public trial. Trees had to mature, results had to be compared, weaknesses had to be seen, not wished away. The future rested on slow evidence, and researchers disciplined enough to let living material answer in its own time. Commercial plantings expanded through California in the late 1960s. Arizona and New Mexico followed. In 1976, America harvested its first commercial crop, about 1.5 million pounds from roughly 4,500 bearing acres. Small by today's measure, enormous to the people carrying the risk. Land had been bought or pledged, wells, irrigation, trees, labor, and equipment had to be paid for, while commercial harvest remained years away. A pistachio crop can take 7 to 10 years to mature. Through every one of those years, bills arrive on time, even when the crop does not. Every young orchard was a promise financed before it could answer. California's Central Valley became the industry's center. Southeastern Arizona brought high desert heat, hard wind, freezes, and groundwater realities. New Mexico growers faced long distances and limited processing access. In Texas, a smaller frontier joined the same national community. American pistachio growers represents members across all 4 states. The scale differs. The exposure feels familiar. An orchard cannot be folded up when water tightens, markets soften, or frost moves through. Trees need care. Machinery needs repair. Growers keep pruning, irrigating, protecting, and replanting, while the return remains beyond the next sunrise. This is not romance from a distance. It is capital, livelihood, and family time held in living wood. Pistachio trees do not negotiate with a calendar. Male and female flowers grow on separate trees. Wind carries the pollen. Bloom must overlap. Too little winter cold can disturb timing. Frost injures tender growth. Heat raises water demand. Wind may carry pollen, or arrive when flowers are not ready. An alternate bearing means a heavy season may be followed by a lighter one. A grower can do months of careful work and watch weather redraw the year. That is the orchard's emotional math. Preparation without control. Responsibility without guarantees. When a block struggles, the questions turn practical. Variety, rootstock, water, salt, disease, timing? What changes now? Knowing the answer may take years to prove. Disease killed trees. Kingman brought alternate bearing and too many blank or closed shell nuts. water and salt tested roots. Growers could absorb loss or build a better system. They backed research, resilient rootstocks, and a University of California breeding program. Golden Hills and Lost Hills opened earlier harvest windows and, in trials, produced more naturally split nuts than Kingman. New varieties improved bloom timing. Pressure chambers read tree stress. Probes follow moisture and salt. Weather data and aerial imagery guide irrigation. Carefully timed university trials saved applied water without reducing yield or quality under tested conditions. Innovation became resilience, one measured correction at a time. Then harvest arrives, and the pace changes. A shaker meets the trunk. Catching frames receive the crop before it reaches the ground. Operators, crews, drivers, mechanics, vendors, and processors become one chain. If one link stops, the clock does not. Nuts mature unevenly. Leave them too long, and exposure to insects and disease rises. Delays beyond 24 hours increase contamination risk. The outer covering comes off. Drying and sorting begin. Repairs happen under lights. Loads keep moving because an orchard's year is arriving by the truck. There is force in this work, but the best harvest is controlled. Clean contact, precise movement, no wasted motion. Years of risk become seconds at each tree. At the processor, effort meets evidence. Pistachios are cleaned, dried, separated, graded, and tested. Staining, damage, closed shells, empty shells, moisture, and safety shape what a delivery becomes. A lot can lose grade, lose value, require rework, or fail. Good intentions cannot sort it back into quality. Under the federal marketing order, shipments from California, Arizona, and New Mexico face quality rules and mandatory aflatoxin testing in USDA-approved laboratories. Federal standards define grades for pistachios in the shell. Imports must meet comparable minimum requirements. Quality is not a claim made over music. It is a standard survived through the orchard, the harvest window, the plant, the laboratory, and every person accountable along the way. The result is a striking American growth story. In 2025, California harvested a record 1.58 billion pounds from 521,000 bearing acres. For the 2025 to 26 marketing year, the United States Department of Agriculture forecasts America as the world's largest pistachio producer and its leading exporter. The same year marked a 10th consecutive season of U.S. export leadership. Those numbers establish scale. They do not explain it. Scale came from families planting into uncertainty, researchers who kept testing, crews returning before daylight, processors investing ahead of demand, and growers treating one good harvest as the responsibility to do it well again. Leadership was not declared. It was accumulated. At Peacock Nut Company in Kingman, Arizona, the national story becomes visible. Close to the canopy, every tree is individual. Leaves in desert wind, branches carrying the season, young growth reaching into open space. Higher up, those lives become lines running toward the mountains. The aerial view reveals order, but it should never hide effort. Someone chose each site, checked each line, repaired what failed, and came back after a hard year. The beauty is not separate from the work. It is patient work, given time to take root. California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas. Different ground, one American industry, still learning. The pistachio traveled for centuries before this American chapter. Here, seeds became experiments. Experiments became orchards and livelihoods. No one kind of hand-built it. Growers carried risk, workers carried the season. Mechanics and vendors kept harvest moving. Researchers turned failure into knowledge. Processors protected each load. Families waited while young trees gave nothing back. That is the American ethos at its best. Courage joined to craft. Begin before certainty. Learn without ego. Hold the standard under pressure. Return after the hard year. Then, when the trees finally answer, share the harvest and begin again.